Hello, last time we have learned in the job order costing system, direct materials and direct labor can be directly traced to each different job and captured by the job cost sheet. But for manufacture overhead, it is impossible to directly trace them to each job since they represent a common cost to support all job productions, such as indirect materials, indirect labor, factory utilities, machinery depreciation, and repairment. So the manufacture overhead must be added to each job through proper allocation. This is like to break down the utilities of an apartment and allocate it to each of the roommate. Using our prior example of the 3 job, like we introduced in the first video. So if the company have 3 jobs in the same period, and assume we have a $6,000 of total manufacture overhead for that period. So I didn't write. So assume we have $6,000 total manufacture overhead. So how you are going to break down this 6,000 overhead to each of the job? The managers have different solutions to do this. The easiest one is average the 6,000 to each of the job, and we can easily calculate it will be 2,000 for each job, right? So that's the easiest method. But in the real production manufacture situations, the job can start from different time and they can require different amount of the consumption of the overhead. Some jobs need more time to finish and some jobs need less time to finish. So average is an easy method, but it will cause inaccurate result of the cost allocation, and as a result, your decision making will be misleading later. So we need to find a better solution. And from the practice, people have developed a method. We allocate the overhead. So we found a more reasonable allocation base, or you can say the cost driver. So what is the main cost driver of most of the overhead? So in another way, so what are the major reasons to cause the manufacture overhead? Then we'll allocate the overhead based upon this cost driver or the cost driver pool. And the easiest way for quite a period, the industry have used direct labor hours. So direct labor hours has been used for quite a long period as the single allocation base or cost driver for manufacture overhead. Because during that time period, the consumption of the overhead for different jobs or for different products are majorly driven by the direct labor hours work on each job. So that means the more direct labor hours required by a job, and the more manufacture overhead will incur for that job as well. For example, depreciations or utilities, or the supervisors, okay, like salary and benefits. This is not a perfect solution. Okay, just like it, but it's easier, so is an easier one to start to learn the allocation process. So direct labor hours has been used for a long period, and the other choices are the direct labor cost. So some companies, they think not the hours, okay, the cost, like the total salary paid to each the job labors. That can be another choice. Or if your production is highly machine based, okay, not labor based, is machinery based, like the heavy machinery industries, then you can use the machinery hours as the allocation base for the manufacture overhead. So those are really the popular ones the industry has been used for quite a long time for the traditional manufacture overhead allocations. And so for example, we have the 6,000 overhead. And if you allocate it based upon direct labor hours, so you may have different levels, right? So you may have 500 hours here, 400 hours here, or 8 hours for job number 3. So you will divide the total overhead by the total direct labor hours for all of the jobs. You can get a allocation rate. And then use this rate to multiply by the total hours of each job. You can get the allocated overhead. So that's a simple description of the overhead allocation. But this one, I'm assuming you know the actual overhead dollar values. And now let's move on to so this is kind of covering the first learning objective. So how to compute a overhead rate, but be careful, not actual overhead. We call a predetermined overhead rate. This predetermined means we use a planned or estimated, or you can say budgeted overhead rate for all of the production in the budget cycle. For example, the quarter or the year. And why we don't use the actual overhead rate, or rather use a predetermined, here are the reasons. But first, catch up. The popular allocation base we haven't been using in the different industries. We have direct labor hours, direct labor dollars, or machine hours. And then there are 3 main reasons for why we choose to use a predetermined rather than actual. Because if you use the actual overhead, we know it includes many different items in a certain period. It can be like 50 or even hundreds, thousands of different items. So in that case, if you want to know the actual overhead for a month or for the quarter, you need to wait a long time to get all of the overhead items into calculation. So it's very time consuming. And then another reason is some of the overhead. You really want to know the actual amount until the end of the period, or maybe even in the beginning of next period. For example, your electricity bills, your phone bills, your water bills. We know the utility companies, they bill the customers on not on the daily basis, right? So like monthly. And sometimes you wouldn't really receive the bill until the month end. So in that case, in the end of the month, I want to do the cost allocation, overhead allocation, but some of the data is not available yet. The actual overhead item, the numbers is not available yet. So it's inhibiting the ability to actually do the cost allocation. So we have to use some estimation for this general, we know, like estimated utility cost. And then finally, if you use actual overhead allocation, that may cause the fluctuation of your cost level by seasonal reasons. Again, if you think about the utility cost, electricity especially, the cost of the electricity in the hot regions, like in Houston, like Southwest, the utility cost in the summer, right? So in the hot seasons can be tripled or even quadrupled than the months in the winter. So if you factor this seasonal fluctuation into your cost allocation, you think about, I'm just making the like t-shirts, I'm making like food. The direct material, direct labor parts are stable, right? Relative stable over the year. But the utility cost can be double, tripled in the summer than in the winter. But can you really say my cost to produce a t-shirt is really different from the t-shirt cost in the winter? And then I will charge my customer differently. I charge the t-shirts high like $10 higher than the price in the winter, the customer wouldn't buy it, right? Because this is unreasonable. We should have a relative stable cost structure so we can set up a reasonable pricing, like pricing levels. So that's another main reason we don't really use the actual cost items, especially the seasonal items. So we want to use a estimation like a total amount for the whole year, because the total overhead of the year will smooth out the fluctuations, because each year the total utilities should be much stable than you're looking for the seasonal factors. So combined with all of these reasons from practice again, for each month, we are not using the actual overhead divided by the allocation base, get an actual rate. Rather, what we do is in the beginning of each period, in the beginning of each period, normally in the beginning of each your budget year or financial period, the company will estimate the total manufacture overhead for the coming period, like the whole year. And we can do the estimation based upon your historical data with the seasonal and the current adjustment, like total manufacture overhead. And now with the data, like a large, long history data available, the data analytics should give us a relative accurate estimation for the total budgeted overhead. Then we also estimate a total units in your allocation base. For example, the total direct labor hours needed for the same fiscal period, like total direct labor hour inputs. So by using the total overhead and the total allocation base, we'll calculate a predetermined overhead rate, is a setup, like you can say standard overhead rate or budgeted overhead rate for the whole coming year. Then all of the months, all of the periods, when you finish any any job, okay, continue use the job order costing. When you finish, because the jobs can be finished in any time point, okay, not really in the end of the month. So when any job is finished in any point of time, we can use this predetermined overhead rate apply to the total allocation base that the job consumed, like the direct labor hours used by each of the job, multiplied by this rate, you can easily find out the allocated overhead to each job when you need the data to report the numbers. Even we know this rate is estimated, but accounting or information is kind of a balance of the cost and the benefits, right? So even we know is estimated is not 100% accurate, but we are doing the best, best possible estimation. So it can satisfy the, when we need the information, the data is available. So we'll make sure the cost data is timely and relevant, rather than wait a long period for the actual allocations. So that satisfies the reporting need and also the decision-making need. So that's how the manufacturer overhead allocation works in the real industries. In this chapter and 3, we talk about the job order costing. So the cost is the manufacturer is allocated to each job. When we touch on chapter 5, the process costing, same thing for manufacturer overhead. We use the predetermined overhead not allocated to each job, but allocated to each of the department or process. Because in that costing system, the cost object is the department or process costing. So this is a brief general introduction of overhead allocation, and I will stop here. In the next video, we'll do the example.